The title of today's story is Unusual New Start and an Awful Ending by user Malachite Rain. This is a continuation of the last video, so if you haven't watched or read that story, I recommend you pause this video and do so now. I will include the links to the original stories, part 1 and 2, as well as the link to my last video in the description. With that out of the way, let's begin. Last time, our monk was traumatized more than just mentally, and the whole party was in low spirits. It wasn't exactly covered in the previous post, so I'll explain a pretty big part that played in otherwise miserable prospects. No matter how well we did, succeeded in what were by all rights suicide missions for anybody else, and keeping hundreds of people alive, we were hardly respected, shown it, or even treated well. It didn't help that the main NPC we really interacted with was Jim, and he was never satisfied, always hypercritical of whatever we did. Slowly but surely, session after session, we were bludgeoned in that way and ended up like frogs in a pot of water. By the time we were cooking, we've already gotten to a higher level. OP Evocation Wizard, Snow Elf Coop, and Genius White Dragon. We couldn't stand Jim's presence for long and quickly left as soon as the monk was patched up. The fire giant encounter was the last one before reaching the Snow Elf lands and finding their main fortress. Upon our arrival, massive 100-foot craters were exploded in front of the gates haphazardly, and the DM told us that only a super strong evocation wizard could make such huge craters like it was nothing. We didn't respond. From the king's daughter we learned the elves are sitting and twiddling their thumbs while they slowly starve and die because they are essentially under siege by the great white dragon that set up shop in the region. The bard learns she was even considering a coup of the king because he wasn't budging on any plans to take the fight to the dragon. This backfired terribly in court when the bard declared he will help the princess in the coup. Me and the rogue washed our hands of this while the monk seemed to perform suicide by guard and Bard was forced to surrender after that. I don't exactly remember how we convinced the king to fight. I think it was me with some speech or something. The armies were being gathered and we marched. Jim joined us. Yes, he joined us in the fight and even gave us orders. So why the fuck were we made to walk over there? DM didn't give much of an answer that didn't make me hate Jim less. The battle began and Jim snuck us into the dragon's lair. Rogue attempted to sneak into what seemed an empty dragon cave with its horde, but turns out the whites set up an ambush. An epic fight ensues, where me and the group's new party member, a barbarian, were either climbing via rope or misty step onto its back to wail on it with impunity. The bard was providing support and buffs, while the rogue was adding damage from below. It was a legitimately fun fight, if a bit stressful due to its legendary actions, but between me and the barbarian, we carved the dragon a new one. What we didn't expect was the dragon knocking us off. Not unexpected, but the next part, and flew to a large icicle, which he tore open to reveal it had hundreds of healing potions that it devoured and healed back to full. We were pissed, but not out of the fight just yet, and we showed to the DM that we had more than enough oomph to kill not one, but 2 dragons. We never got to kill it as it fled out of the cave with me and Barbarian on top of it, and knocked off at the top of the mountain while the rogue and bard got nuked by a delayed fireball self-destruct mechanism a white dragon put in place. Bard died in the cave in Rogue's Evasion OP. Bard turned back to Changeling upon death, and we were granted a rest scroll and an otherwise completely cursed dragon horde. Insult to injury was, after nearly permanently losing yet another party member, Jim is described to have lost a front leg in his great battle with hundreds of wyverns, and how he used a regeneration scroll to get it back. It was the Lich's scroll from before, and he acted smug on how it could have been ours. I still had slots and HP left and nearly attacked the dragon because he was low HP. Legions of fanatical bandits. The snow elves gave us hollow praise, and when we asked about more tangible rewards we can use in the war, we were chastised and told that saving countless lives of elves, garnering their support for the war and their gratitude, was reward enough. We were then sent on a side tangent by Jim to deliver an orb of dragonkind all the way to the southern deserts to a djinn. I told Jim off that if he was expecting us to walk over there, he can find somebody else, and thus forced him to teleport us, but nowhere close to the djinn. Wandering for a week solved that quest, and we got back home, which had a bandit problem. The bandits turn out to number in the thousands, and have equipment forged and made far better than any civilized nation could produce with magical capes. So these people were decked out in high-quality gear, an untamed wilderness, and were suicidal fanatics to the cause. They sieged the city and even broke through with catapults, trebuchets, and what else. We didn't nearly die, but half the city was sacked by the time we drove them back under my leadership, Rogue's urban warfare tactics, Bard's terrain manipulation, and Barbarian's brutality. We didn't expect to get much thanks, and we didn't, but Jim again chastised us at our losses and afterwards sent us to deal with one of his sudden epic triad of evil: Dracolich, Death Tyrant, and Vampire Lord. The latter was our next target. By the time we reached his fortress, he met us halfway and offered us a way out of this world, as while we had a chance of winning, he knew the odds were stacked. After deliberation, we accepted his offer and went through a portal to a new world. New world, new bullshit. The new world we entered was high-powered fantasy embroiled in a balanced war between good and evil, and we were actual chosen ones as we didn't match up in the cosmic balance, and thus were considered wildcards that can tip the scales. Despite this status, explained by the good guys, they didn't do anything to help us except slight guidance or offering to sell items at exorbitant prices, justifying that if they gave it for free, the evil side would be equally as strong somehow. Class mechanics were treated as reality. Battlemaster Know Your Enemy feature, for example, so level 7 fighters were employed to check out possible applicants right from the get-go. Tons of OP DMPCs who the DM had once played made numerous appearances in ever-increasing fantastical cutscenes. DM had tried to placate us with tons of gold, an airship, and flying brooms, but no matter what we did or bought, somebody was better or had nicer toys. My pressure pot burst on a quest to attain a legendary sunblade in a magical dungeon that will provide us with a relic after certain challenges, but only after we nearly died in our dreams from an assassin of Lolth who never failed in his skills. The last challenge for me was to defeat a guardian who demanded a duel. I couldn't beat him, and the DM was yelling at me that it was obvious how I could win. The obvious way to win is to disregard the duel and just gang up on the guardian. The Sunblade was mine, and I had a meeting with Pellar. The Pellar my character knew in the old world was a shattered god, barely alive and suffering, who had belief in mortal kind. This Pellar just chastised me like a disappointed parent how I could have been so silly and not did the obvious thing. I had enough and began talking shit to the god, calling them hypocrites and everything else while they held themselves above mortals despite being downright petty, while he said every life mattered a lot. So I called him out on it and went to stab myself with the Sunblade. Pellar intervened, and apparently him doing so either got him killed or nearly destroyed the world. Either way, he was gone and Lolth had free dibs on the sun now. I just left after that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a long and arduous campaign that shouldn't have really happened. We were frogs in a pod and we only realized we were being boiled near the end of it. Thanks for reading.